Hey guys, this week we're talking about the dynamic effort method. It was made famous by Louie Simmons and the Westside Barbell guys. They're famous for their conjugate system, which is dynamic effort is one of the methods within the conjugate system. But we're going to take a deep dive. So here was the biggest thing. When I was a powerlifter, the most confusing thing was that you would hear, or Louie would write about the dynamic effort in a very, I'm sure as I think back, he was just saying this is the base model, so he would have for squats, you would do the anywhere from 12 to 9 sets of 2, ranging from a total weight of 75, 80, 85% or less. It would change. Early on it was even lighter. And so the confusing thing was then you would see Chuck using 500 pounds of bar weight and 600 pounds of bands. I mean, it was more than his max. And so that is not speed day. And, guys like Jason Coker, if you've watched the Westside documentary, he's in there. His idea of speed day is going heavy. And so was mine. And, some people would say speed dynamic effort days just rocked for them. And some people would say it didn't do a whole lot. And I was one of those. But now I know, and here's why, is that some people have qualities already instilled. Like Chuck Vogelpool is a fast dude. So did he really need to work on rate coding? Probably not. And he just needs to get better and better at going super heavy, producing maximum force, and the adaptations that come from that. And so the thing is that, understanding the different velocities, force velocity zones will help you understand what you need to work on based on your sport and based on who you are. If you read the article, I talked about at least 2 different tests that you can do with GymAware. That's the dynamic strength index, or just doing a force velocity profile to figure out, where are you lacking in your abilities. And with each of these velocity zones comes with different types of adaptations. And so I've summarized them here for you. So do those tests, figure out where you need to work, understand the sport. If you play football, spending some quality time here. If you're a linebacker, you're going to have a lot of collisions at the line of scrimmage. This is going to be a good thing. If you're a wide receiver and you want to get really good in that acceleration off the line so you can close the distance between you and the defensive back, spending some quality time there. So understand your sport, understand who you are, and then decide where you need to spend the most time. This is Prilla's chart. Louie Simmons talks about it a lot, and you can see him using it. Sometimes it's not as direct as I am. I've broken it down a little bit more based on not just my own, but research from other people. And so here you'll see there's optimal amount of reps, but then there's a total range, one being a lot less, one being super high. And the thing is that, there is a point within training that you want to overreach to really encourage your body to adapt and then create produce further adaptations. And so if you want to go, for example, 75%, if you're on an optimal week, 18 would be the optimal amount of total reps. If you want to really overreach a bit, 24. If you want to allow it for recovery, 12. And so that's a good idea. This is just a good starting spot. I hope if you're a coach by now, you know that what works for one doesn't work for the other. And that is really why I'm doing this deeper dive, is to help you understand that what works for Chuck might not work for you, but then again, it might. And so, or for me. So this is the workout. The main thing I want to point out about the dynamic effort for powerlifting is that what I've done is clarify in Burley Hawk's latest article about the dynamic strength or dynamic effort method. He would it kind of looked like he was talking about something different for bench than he does squat, and that is what Louie said too. But then he would say the same percentages, but just use mini bands. But they double those mini bands, and as you'll see in a minute, that is still going to be around 20% or higher, depending on who you are and how long your arms are. And then for the deadlifts, I have just looked at more at Prilla's chart. We definitely took a lot less there. As you see here, you're doing 24. And what I suggest is stay somewhere between 25 to 35% of the total load as the squats, because this is happening in the same workout. So you can't just do, just because Prilipin said it, for total reps, you've already done those total reps. So here you just want to do 25 to 30%. Remember, deadlift is concentric in nature. You don't get a lot of eccentric advantages from deadlift anyway. So just working on your technique, working on rate of force development, meaning whatever the load is, you're going to try to accelerate through it as quickly as possible, and to understand that. And that's why I programmed it like I did. And for powerlifters, starting with strength speed, going into an accelerated strength, you get your circumax. It's all in the article. So mainly here, I just want to take a deeper dive into the why. And then having a realization phase, I'll quickly address that, is just doing bands and then going to a meet and doing straight weight is definitely not a great idea. Because the one thing about Chuck, who was in Vogelpool, who was an amazing squatter, is that he never really looked comfortable in the squat. It'd be tough to get the bar out. He would fall backwards sometimes, but then when he hit his groove, he's going to break a world record. So I think spending a little bit more time with just a straight weight, doing a regular squat, would have benefited just based on the principle of specificity. But that's my thoughts on that. For the keys I want you to understand is the bench press load. If based on what Prilipin says, keeping it relatively the same seems to make sense. This is straight from one of the Westside Barbell articles. So understanding that the mini bands, when they're doubled, it's 80 to 100%. So for a 400-pound bencher, that's 20%. And so, I just recommend keeping the total load. And here's what I would say. I said add 15%, but just understanding that as long as the total load, so we use a luggage scale, understanding that the total load needs to be about 65%. And with velocity, now we can measure it and say, is it 0.75 or faster? If it is, it's good. So really this becomes irrelevant now that we can actually measure. So you can use one or both, but the key is stay at least 0.75. And if you do these correctly, 65% for straight weight is 0.75. So I've given you a lot of leeway. It's probably going to move 0.85 or faster. And that's why these heavier total intensities are going to still be in that strength speed velocity zone, because they deload at the bottom. So the accelerated strength, the circumax, I think I've covered it. The deadlift, the circumax is just really with the circumax is the reason why I said bands or chains. This might be a good time to use the chains, because chains move, and so they don't necessarily ground you, so like the bands do. So it's going to feel more like straight weight. So you'll still get the advantages of using accommodating resistance, but it's going to be more specific to what you're going to do if you compete in powerlifting. And then the realization phase, take those off and go to work. It's just the biggest difference in now and then is now we can actually measure it. And with using something like a dynamic strength index or force velocity profile, you can determine what you should really do. And so this is just, once again, written for the average person. So you can use it now that you know why you need to do strength speed or speed strength. You can write your own programs. So this is for athletic performance. The biggest difference is that the tester is going to come at the end, is going to be more of a high rate of force development, maximum force testing, meaning I'm going to test anywhere, I'm going to test their 1RM anywhere from 0.5 to 0.7 meters per second. And that's going to be based on the sport. So if they're, for example, if they're a weightlifter, we're going to use probably a little closer to 0.5 because it still is a strength sport. But if they're a volleyball or a baseball player or a wide receiver, seeing what they can go do for one single at 0.7 meters per second might be more beneficial. And so it just really tells me, have I increased their ability to produce force at a higher rate? And so we start with accelerative, go to circumax, do a realization, and here we hit their big 1RM. And once again, for an athlete, a 1RM, I still would cap it at 0.3 meters per second on the squat at absolute slowest, and 0.25 or point 0.2 at the absolute slowest on the deadlift or bench, because it's getting close to the 1RM, but they're still not going to miss. But probably a little higher for athletes if I were you. Like 0.4 for the squats, and for the deadlift 0.3 in the bench is what I would recommend. Then they go into strength speed. Then they hit the speed, because you really want to work on their ability to produce force at higher rates as athletes. This is something very similar that I use for Tommy Bohannon, 7-year veteran in the fullback in the NFL, who still holds the 225 for reps record for all running backs, by the way. Here's more of an intermediate athlete, and so they don't, when you're first getting started, and this is still, you'll need to been in the game for 2 to 3 years before you do this, because, up until then, just stick with like the repetition method. And I go deeper into that if you look at the article that this is going to complement. But here, just starting with strength speed, working on accelerated strength in the mesocycle. And even if you don't want to use bands, then just use the velocity is what I would recommend. And probably for an intermediate athlete, I would get the most out of the least. If you're still seeing improvements in their speed, their jumping, all the things you're after, then don't use bands or chains, So, but if you want to use them, and at the end of the day, it's fun. So some athletes, it's fun to use bands because it's a novelty, and that alone will create gains just because it's something new the body has to adapt to. Probably just neurological improvements, but still. And then sets of reps here for accelerated strength. When you test them, staying well above, once again above 0.4 meters per second. Staying above 0.3 in the bench or deadlift, and the younger they are, the higher that should be. So that's just a recommendation for the average. And when it says deadlift, using a trap bar is fine too, whatever you want to do. All right, as a conclusion, I think the biggest difference in now and then is now we can actually really be specific to the athlete. I didn't need a lot of dynamic effort days. I played football my whole life. I was doing weightlifting at a very high level at the Olympic Training Center prior to becoming a top-ranked powerlifter. So to increase my rate coding even more was a waste of time. It was super high. Same with Chuck Vogelpool. So, but for several people, like even my friend Doug Larson, he could do dynamic effort only, and his 1RM would go up, which shows that he needed more rate coding and the benefits that come with moving weight very quickly. So now I've laid it out in a way, hopefully, that once you understand all these concepts, you can use the dynamic effort to complement your sport, the sport of your athletes, and the athlete in general based on their genetics. I hope this helps and clarifies a lot. Just want to say that Louie Simmons has done more for strength and conditioning than any one human that I've ever known. And so in no way am I disagreeing. I'm just saying in his last conversation with me, he hoped for anyone who had followed him for a long time that they would take his concepts and keep going further. I would say now that that velocity mechanism, our tools are readily available, like our flex units or the GymWare RS, now that more people have them, we can really take his concepts and use specific principles to really dial them in and get the most benefit.